Good evening, everybody. I really want to first thank you all for braving the winter that we had last night. My name is Ashford Hughes. I'm the Mayor's Senior Advisor for Workforce Diversity and Inclusion. And this was our third and final listening session as we find ways that we can do better and have a more equitable process as Metro works with minority businesses within our community. I first want to acknowledge several people before I kind of go over the parameters of what we want to try to accomplish today. We have our Budget and Finance Director here with us, Ms. Talia Lomax. We have the manager of the Office of Women in Business Assistance, Mr. Brian Gleason. And we have our New Americans Office Director, Vanessa Lazon, in the back. And we have Stephanie McCullough, who also works in the mayor's office as the mayor's Director of Community Engagement. So thank you all today. So what we want to do here today, and again, braving this weather, the date and the time, and the changes that our office and that the city has had in leadership, still grateful for you all to be out here. Really want to hear from you this evening to kind of get your voice and get you on the record as we try to make this process better. What I will be asking is that you stand up and give your name, your business, or just the organization who you're representing, and talk about the positives, the negatives, or what you think we can do better moving forward as we try to make certain that the process is equitable for our minority and small business owners in the city. Tonight, we will not be answering questions. We're here to listen and better gauge what we can do in the city. So you have key people here that are with the city that are here to listen. Again, this will be recorded, so you'll be on the record, and we'll be able to follow this later on and get all the information and follow up with you. So as we get started, I will make sure that we're cognizant of everybody's time. But if you would like to be the first person to stand and come up and kind of give your testimony, give your experience and how we can do things better, please come forward. Right here.
Okay, my name is Justin Southwick. I'm a resident of Davidson County. I have worked either for my own company or other small businesses for the last 11 years in working on Metro government work. Previously, most of that time was with a women-owned business, and now I'm my own small business. The first compliment I would like to make is to Metro General Services, and the way I read this evening's purpose was to talk about barriers for Metro work. I realize there are multiple authorities and agencies, so some of my comments are going to overlap, but I still think it's valuable content. Maybe you will too. The first compliment is to Metro General Services and anyone who uses iSupplier, because iSupplier has been a great way to make things much more consistent, and the method of communication to small businesses is quite good. And I make this point because it's not nearly as consistent or ubiquitous as with the other agencies. So the other agencies I don't think have nearly as consistent and automated and streamlined. When you've done a couple of projects in iSupplier and you kind of know what's coming, you know the documents to look for, you know what to expect, everything's in the same place, and so it's quite, it makes things a lot easier. Our biggest resource, our most valuable resource is time, so because, and especially as a small business owner, you're wearing multiple hats, and you wish you had a full-time business development person sometimes to be able to track down all these opportunities, and because sometimes we don't, we're having to do that ourselves. So the more things that can be processed through a single point is better. Now I've also had to learn through many trial and error experiences that the nature of there being different authorities is so that they legislatively and by statute are allowed to have their own purchasing processes. And so that's why we call it the Metro National Airport Authority, and Sports Authority, and so on. And they can make their own purchasing rules. But I think that the tool exists within iSupplier to potentially have them keep their own rules, but use the vehicle of iSupplier or something similar to have a wider outreach. I mean, there are thousands of companies, I think, probably, that get touched by something like iSupplier. And that kind of competition in terms of all these firms being able to compete on multiple opportunities, I think would enhance the other authorities who may not have as many firms on their lists, if you will, of vendors. So I think there might be an opportunity there to use an existing investment that the city is already making in something like the information system that is iSupplier, to be able to maybe take advantage of that and still preserve the authorities' purchasing rules. So that's my first point. Second is more inclusion on professional service. I'm going to call it sole source, non-compete opportunities. And I have to describe this because the way I understand it, there are a couple kinds of sole source opportunities. One is where it's a small dollar amount and you're kind of the only vendor that does that. I might be mixing up some things here, but the point is we have worked on very, very small projects under $1,000 where a metro government can determine that, yeah, these are the only folks that these are the folks that are well suited to do this job, and it's a very small dollar amount, so that it's a very, very small thing. What I'm talking about is the much larger opportunities that I'm going to use the word sole source again because it's one example is professional services, that an agency can determine that they don't have to compete. They don't have to solicit multiple inputs or vendors. They can just contact one vendor, and if that vendor puts in a reasonable set of qualifications and pricing, then that agency can just choose to go with that professional service firm. And I believe this is specific to professional services, and the way it's been explained to me is that the agency does not want to have to be forced to choose the lowest price. And the analogy that's been given to me is that you wouldn't want to have a surgeon doing surgery on you, and that surgeon was selected to do that surgery because they were the cheapest. So I completely understand the idea behind having qualified applicants, and you're not forced to take the cheapest vendor. However, interestingly, in professional services, almost never are professional services firms evaluated on cost in the selection process. My experience is invitation to bid is a very strict terminology to say that, okay, you're putting in a bid and then we have to take the bid or we have to look at the rules. And so when you're talking about professional services, we rarely have to put fees in. So fees are never really almost never part of a professional services solicitation. So because of that analogy doesn't seem to work. And I'm saying all this because we've been on the losing side of this. We found out about one of our competitors that won a multi-year exclusive contract to provide services that we could have just as well competed for, but yet we're basically locked out for, I think it might have been a 5-year agreement. It wasn't Metro General Services. It was another, very big department, though, within Metro government. So there's several things going on there. One is the whole fee thing doesn't really jive, I think. Number two is now a small business is locked out of the potential opportunities that could have improved their qualifications that would have allowed them to compete in the future. So now when this 5 years is up, this firm that did win has 5 more years of experience and rapport with Metro Agency, and that small firm may not have had nearly that many opportunities to improve their qualifications to then compete head-to-head again. So it's almost like whoever gets in, they have a much easier way to kind of stay in that role. So that's a bit of a disadvantage. And then I don't even think it demands publication. I think you can just pick up the phone, request a proposal from somebody you know who does that work, and award it all without having to announce to potentially qualified competitors. I say that because that's what I recollect about the whole experience, and that's why we're so kind of burned by it, or so upset about it. I still remember it to this day because it just seemed like really non-competitive unnecessarily. And lastly, on the same subject, from a financial stewardship standpoint, these non-competitive relationships do not provide any check on the fees that that the selective vendor can charge, especially over a multi-year relationship. So, from a taxpayer standpoint, it doesn't seem to be the best arrangement. Now, I'll give you an example of where something has worked very well on another project we were on, and I'll call it a more equitable solution for a similar scenario. Metro Water's Clean Water Nashville project pre-qualified 17 different firms who met a minimum set of qualifications. This is a very, very large project for the city. Hundreds of millions of dollars will be spent over, have been spent and will continue to be spent over a 10-year time frame. So pre-qualifying 17 different firms, the work kind of, for lack of a better word, the work kind of gets, well, I'll say what it really amounts to is these 17 firms have met the minimum qualifications and now can compete, with their near peers that are also pre-qualified. So we're talking about still having qualified firms, but you still have some competition that goes on there, and the work does tend to get spread around, not in a bad way, not in an unqualified way, but there's everybody kind of gets some work out of that, even the tiniest firms. And the positive of this kind of setup is even if a small firm were to perform poorly, you're not in a long-term relationship. So it's not like it's not like my scenario here, or my example of a good way to do this is forcing Metro to be stuck with a small firm if things don't work out. So still having more than one firm kind of on a rotation or on some kind of competitive basis after they've met minimum qualifications seems to me still competitive, still cost competitive, and still fair to small firms to compete with big firms. Lastly, is more reward for prime contractors that reinforce Metro's small business goals. Small firms have, in our experience, repeatedly have little leverage over the fee that prime contractors can pay to us. Prime contractors are really good at doing their PNP and doing their outreach, and they're really, really proficient at that. And I will tell you, every Metro meeting I go to, the project, Joanne Carr and others, and they're always explaining it, and they do a great job, and the forms are there, and everything's well oiled. That all works great, except you're on a winning team, and then in Metro General Services, there's the 48-hour letter of intent. And that's also a great tool, because that kind of holds them to saying that, hey, you went into the dance with this small firm, and now you have to sign within 48 hours of award that you're going to commit to them a certain percentage, certain dollar amount, whatever's negotiated there. We have been on other projects where we have been completely cut out of projects because there was not that same letter of intent process. And so I won't name the agencies, but it's happened more than once. So that's also a problem because we don't have a BAO to even kind of act as a mediator, if you will, or a ombudsperson process in some of these other agencies. So that, to us, has definitely lost this business. And so we didn't believe we were acting in any inappropriate way, kept trying to go to the prime and say, hey, what's our portion of the deal? Normally, if it's a general services contract, we got to sign a letter of intent. And they just never produced a letter of intent and got unhappy with us pursuing what we thought was a fair arrangement, and they just said we were too difficult to deal with, and we never got a dime out of the whole deal. So there are other value engineering situations that have gone on where we've been cut out, but at least we've gotten started on those. But the thing that really is frustrating and a barrier is when it's great when they court you up front, but it's not so great when there's no leverage to force them to keep you on the team. Ways that leverage can manifest itself, or that lack of leverage can manifest itself, is where a prime can, go in, say they're going to do 30, 40, 50%, whatever, on their DBE goals, but then really, when it comes down to it, they want to self-perform as much as they can. So if 20 was the goal and they went in with 40, they might be able to backpedal back down to 20, because that's just kind of the target. So that's neither here nor there, but that tends to allow them to kind of crunch us down after the award has been given. Now, I will say that we've followed up with BAO in the past, and they have talked about more recently, I will say recently in the last 2 or 3 years, been able to improve their reporting capability a lot better, because a lot more stuff going through iSupplier. And I think before there were lots of different spreadsheets, a lot of different ways of tracking. And because there were a lot of different ways of tracking, it wasn't so easy to consolidate and see who was paying their subs on a regular, according to the percentages and the goals and so on. So instead of just the DBE outreach up front, what if the primes were also scored on past performance as a percentage of their score? So yeah, they're saying they're going to have a high DBE goal, but how well have they performed in the past? So if Metro is really trying to say, hey, we want to support, DBE firms, well, the primes who have supported DBE firms in the past to the greatest extent. So if the goal was 20% before, and they did 40%, well, they're kind of a 2 times. They're doing really well, and they're well surpassing the DB goal. So maybe if a little bit of credit went to them based on their past performance, rather than the firms that are out there just trying to meet the minimum, that would be a way to potentially reward firms that are pushing for the same goals that Metro is trying to push for. From a financial stewardship standpoint as well, small firms, in that scenario, small firms tend to have lower overhead and lower cost structures. So even then, a bigger firm, a bigger prime, is potentially able to offer a more competitive price if they've got a higher percentage of DBE firms. So I don't think this is necessarily a costlier scenario either. So I can't see a downside of it, other than the big firms would not be able to self-perform as much as maybe they would like. So main themes, great opportunities to potentially consolidate procedures and process. Second, hopefully more inclusion on potentially what are currently non-compete type situations. And third, more reward for primes that reinforce Metro's goals. Thank you.
Thank you for that good testimony and information. Again, we're here tonight to kind of hear from you all, to kind of get a gauge, the good, the bad, the indifferent about your experience trying to procure contract opportunities with Metro. What can we be doing better? What are we doing well? We had some good testimony just now. I'll again offer anybody else that has any testimony that they would like to give to go on to the record. Please come forward. Anyone that would like to give testimony, please come forward. Yep. Doing all right? Yeah.
Okay. My name is Devinder Sandhu. I'm an engineer. I've been here 40 years in Nashville. I've seen Nashville grow from almost before desegregation to it being the international city. Almost an international city. During that time, I have mainly lived in West Nashville, but many of my friends while I was in college came from North Nashville and some of the poorer areas in town. I was at Vanderbilt, and the folks from North Nashville who came there were mainly athletes, because Vanderbilt wanted to be competitive in the Southeastern Conference, and they could only do it with the minorities. Now, when you look at the makeup over the period of the Vanderbilt academic, the teachers and the professors and other folks working there, the higher ranks were non-minority positions. The minorities held the janitorial positions. They were cooks. They did the labor. And it hasn't changed much over there. Similarly, in the city of Nashville, as I got out of college and I saw what was happening in the city of Nashville, similar things were mimicked there as well. At the last session, some of you may or may not have been there, but since I've been here for 40 years, I saw the decline of Jefferson Street, which was a black Main Street. And we saw the resurgence of Main Street. Along with the decline of Jefferson Street was the decline of the businesses that made the minority community in Nashville, or the black community at that time. I was one of the few Indians in town. It was mainly black and white town. Those businesses were missing, went downhill fast. And the dribble effect of having that happen, the slow drip of losing the businesses and the talent, is what has led to today the lack of minority participation in participating in the wealth growth of Nashville. So why did we lose those businesses? Why did we lose the black masons, the minority masons? Why did we lose the medical and the engineering community? Why did we lose the surveyors who served that community so well? Why did we lose the concrete folks, the builders? We lost them because they were not able to participate in the construction and the building of Nashville, Tennessee for the last 40 years. So when we look at, now we look at how can we bring those folks back, we have to nurture that. How we nurture that? We nurture it by encouraging those businesses to participate and to grow. And one of the best places to participate, the biggest contractors in town are Vanderbilt University, building all those buildings over there, and the city of Nashville. Yet when you look around at who the contracts are awarded to, very few minorities, very few. So you may or may not know this, but I participated in that Fort Negley Greer development, which from the beginning was flawed. And we tried to question why that facility was being put out to bid like that, a public property being offered to developers. I wanted to keep it for public space, but I was forced, by the way the RFQ was written, to do a private development. So we went at it wholeheartedly. I thought we had a very good vision and had put together a good proposal. I was the only minority participant to submit on that RFQ. Part of my team was a minority, one of the top minority contractors in town who's been here for many, many years, Roger Ligon of ICF Builders. Also had Don Harden, who's a project management guy, who helped Metro write the diversity plan. He was on my team and helped us write our diversity plan. We had Logan Patry Engineering, a structural engineering firm that's minority owned, and we had 2 women-owned businesses on our team. We were probably the most minority strong team out of all the participants. Yet we finished 4 out of 5 in our grading. I didn't understand that. I still don't understand that. So that is why I'm at this listening event and other ones, and I'm being made my voice heard at every place I can. I have teamed up with NAACP and other minority groups that are trying to get justice for minorities and participation in businesses. And we will make a change. But I am a little disappointed at the turnout here. I think it seems like 50% of the folks are from Metro and very few from the minority community. And I'll tell you why that is. The reason for that is they've given up. The folks on my team had warned me at the beginning of my attempt to do the Metro project at Greer Fort Negley. They said, "Why are you doing this? You don't have a snowball's chance in hell of getting anywhere with it." They already know who they're going to give it to. I'm an engineer. I was naive. I believed in numbers. I believe in the system being just. This was one of my first ventures into doing a public venture that maybe I would have gained some economic benefit. For 40 years, I've volunteered my services to City Park Board and to the children of Nashville in developing soccer and other sports. We're trying to teach them skills in mathematics and English and so on. I'd volunteered. This was my time to try to convert a public space into a more usable public space with a little bit of sprinkling of private around to help fund it. Very surprised, very, very surprised at the outcome. So we filed a protest. Our appeal was thrown out like, why are you even bothering to appeal? The folks who were on the appeal board were pretty much not independent folks. They were part of Metro government. So the changes that we made is you can't have what's that old saying, can't have the fox guarding the hen house. You got to have independent people out there looking and evaluating these deals. The Fort Negley project was withdrawn because graves of slaves and other archaeological remains were supposedly found on the site. But I don't think that was the real reason. I think the real reason was there's an outcry about doing that development there by turning over land to the public, from the public to the private. There's some great places to do public-private partnerships, but that one might not have been one place to do it, or done in that manner. So my encouragement to you guys who are doing this study, this is the third study I think that we've done over the last few years. And studies are great, but results are better. Studies are great, but having a result is better. If a study is presented to the population and over the next 10 years, we're still at 2% black participation and less than 10% DBE participation in the sharing of the wealth and the growth of Nashville, then there's something wrong. The system has to be changed. We have to nurture these businesses that are out there. We have to encourage the small businesses who cannot afford to get a bond, who cannot afford to get the insurance. Throw them some jobs out there. Let them show you what they can do. Let me show you what I can do. I mainly toil in the private industry because there they look at my results and not all these grading systems to choose me to provide a service. There was a set-aside program in this country at one time, the 8A set-aside and other set-asides. All we have in this city right now is promises. We promise to use 10% minorities. We promise to use 20% minorities. Those promises are not kept. Reminds me of the Cherokee and the promises that were made to them in our great state a few hundred years ago. Those proud folks owned all the lands in Tennessee. All these names that we hear around here are named after Cherokee names, Cherokee words. Those promises are broken. The tribes, those people were broken. They were shifted out of this country, out of their country into Oklahoma and other far-flung western states. This is a new century. Let's not let something like that happen again in a different way. Let us not let the minority community in this town wither and die because of neglect. Nurture it. Bring it to business. And be mentors for the young kids who are out there playing basketball or running around in the fields. Teach them math. Teach them computing skills. Teach them robotics. That's the future. It's not basketball. It's not football. I love sports. I have a passion for sports. But that's not the future. The future has to be education. The future has to be participation. We have to have young kids who are being mentored, who become interns at an engineering company, at a building, at a trade. Let them be plumbers. Let them be welders. Let them be bricklayers. And we need something from Metro government that encourages that pushes that type of participation in the projects that we're building at a breakneck speed right now in this town. But there's nothing that comes out of the minority, the black minority community, that needs to be built back up. I think we're looking at models at other cities, how they can do that. Don Harden told me that when he comes back to Nashville from going to Seattle, going to Denver, going to Washington, D.C., going to Atlanta, going to Chicago, and he sees a minority participation in the building in those towns, and he comes back here, he thinks he's come back to the deep south of the plantation era. Although blacks are not doing the work here. They're merely shunted off to the side. So let's join the future. Let's be the city that we can be. Let us be an international city that looks at raising, being that rising tide that raises all the ships, raises all the boats, and not sink the minority ones. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them.
Thank you. Anyone else feel passionate to come up and give their testimony? Good, the bad, the indifferent, experiences, friends' experiences with trying to procure work with Metro government. Anyone else want to come and
Good evening. My name is Diana Onyejaka. Oh, you guys can hear me? Oh, okay. My name is Diana Onyejaka. I am a product of Nashville. I've been in Nashville since about 1995. I did my undergraduate here, and my master's here as well at Tennessee State. Received my law degree down at Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And then I came back to Nashville, Tennessee, tried very hard to find work, just to kind of get my career started. And unfortunately, met a lot of door closed. So because of that, I decided to create my own business, and one that would be inclusive of people from all walks of life, all backgrounds. It's an international consulting firm. It's called DC Consult International. And part of my business is we are very, very serious about promoting diversity and inclusion. It's the first thing you're going to notice if you go on my website. We want to push that out here in Nashville. And like this gentleman has said, because of some of the difficulties a lot of minority owners, business owners, small business owners face, it drives a lot of good talent out of the city. I have also considered leaving Nashville. And let's see. Part of my business, I offer mediation services. I also offer research and development studies. And we also seek to engage in business with, business relationships with businesses that wish to go abroad or come in. We help facilitate that, specifically in African and Caribbean countries. What I found was when trying to engage government contracts, the requirements to actually even initiate getting our business considered was astronomical. I mean, for somebody that's starting a new business, specifically trying to engage contracts that are specialized and really needs minority engagement, it's been very, very challenging. And discouraging to the point where we now see contracts outside of the state of Tennessee. So if that should let you know how discouraging it's been. So I'm hoping that, especially with those specialized areas of business, that the government considers that there aren't a lot of us engaged in those types of studies or engaged in those types of businesses, and should consider that when they're creating those requirements, because it can be discouraging. And that's pretty much it. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So as I look to my two friends in the back, if you have anyone that wants to give testimony, comments, or anything. Well, before we close, I want to thank everybody for giving their testimony tonight. I know, again, we want to get this process right. We want to make certain that we are doing things in a more equitable manner, and that's why we have the people here that can make that happen. I do, before we close out, want to make certain that you know about some of the actual workshops that will be coming up. As we leave here and as we get all the information from this listening session, hopefully this will help us guide what those workshops look like. And those workshops will be how to do business with Metro. And they will be led by the Office of Business and Women's Assistance, the Procurement Department, as well as in partnership with the Mayor's Office. In the past, we've held 2 of those and had really good turnout, really mapping out from A to Z the process needed for businesses to make certain that they're registered with iSupplier, to make certain that they become certified to get in the count as we count and make sure we have the number for DBEs and minority businesses. Please get that information. We will be sending out emails to you as a reminder of those dates coming up, but we really want you to get the information out to your business colleagues, other folks that may be thinking about wanting to do a business, so they can understand what's necessary to actually be more competitive in winning the process. Many of us will be around here for a little while. If you have questions, you want to find out more information about the Business Assistance Office, we have a representative here that can guide you with getting more information about that. As they say at my church, if our hearts and minds are clear, Thank you, and everybody have a good evening.